Good morning, members. Welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee of the 5th of July. Have we got apologies, Julie?
We have apologies, Chairman, from the Chairman, Mr Worthington, and County Councillors Arshad, Flunder, Ford and Sylvester Hall.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, anybody? The minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of April. Can we sign them as a true record? Yes. No amendments needed? Thank you. So the appointment of the Standards Panel, number 4. Over to you, Julie.
It's just a quick item, Chairman. At Annual Council in May, as you know, main committee membership is agreed, and at this Annual Council, they also recommended to this committee the 5 names from this committee that should form a standards panel, should you need to have any standards hearings. The names are listed as County Councillors Haddon, Hutton, Trowbridge, Williams and Worthington, and it's basically just asking whether you are happy to accept that recommendation and agree to those appointments.
The only comment I'd have, Julie, is why is it not cross-party? I would have thought Mr Ashad would have been on there. No.
It was a recommendation from Council, Chair.
Okay, we're...
Sorry?
Just Mr Ashad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, I know he doesn't. Okay.
Said Chair.
Thank you. Apologies. Annual report of work of the Audit and Standards Committee. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report of the work of the Audit and Standards Committee. So as you will be aware, a key role of this committee is to report to full Council on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's governance, risk management and internal control arrangements, as well as the work of internal and external audit and the financial reporting arrangements. Also, this committee reports to full Council where they've added value, promoted or improved the control environment, and this report helps to fulfil that requirement. So on page 6 of your pack, this gives some further background to the Audit and Standards Committee, which was first established in 2005 and is a key component of the Council's corporate governance framework. In terms of when the committee has met, that is detailed in paragraph 7 on pages 6 and 7 of your pack. So during 21-22, the committee met 7 times, and that was a mix of virtual, hybrid and in-person meetings, hybrid being where officers were virtual and members attended in person. So I split up the work of the Audit and Standards Committee into a few key headings, the first one being internal audit. So one of the key activities that the committee does in relation to internal audit is to endorse the internal audit plan for the year ahead. So back in July 21, the strategy and plan paper came to this committee for endorsement, and there was a further progress report as well in relation to the delivery of the plan back in December 21. And as you will be aware, during the course of the year, any limited assurance reports, special investigations are also presented in full to this committee. And detailed in paragraph 8 on page 7 is some of the reports that were presented to this committee during 21-22. Also, the committee has received various information during the course of the year in relation to the COVID pandemic in terms of our response regarding internal audit work and the support that we have given to the Council in relation to that. And also, during the year, internal audit has provided information to this committee on various transformation programmes such as highways transformation and various digital transformation programmes as well. The committee also approves annually the audit charter, which sets out the scope of the internal audit function. So this does allow members to consider what we do as the in-house internal audit service. Moving on to page 9 of your pack and the counter fraud work. So again, the counter fraud plan is presented to this committee for endorsement as part of the overall audit planning endorsement process. So the counter fraud plan sets out the activity that's going to be taking place during the year ahead. And again, there's a progress report on that back in December 21. During the year as well, this committee receives investigation reports and any lessons learnt, and this committee has received information in relation to the purchase card investigation, the taxi investigation, amongst a few areas. Moving on to governance and risk management, well, one of the key activities under this heading is the annual review of the Code of Corporate Governance, and that's going to be presented later on today to you. And this is a key governance document that feeds into the annual governance statement. The annual governance statement is also approved by this committee, and the 2021 AGS was approved in December 21. The Council and the Council's, this committee also receives the Statement of Accounts, and that was also reported in the December 21 committee. In addition, members will be aware that during the course of the year, various governance documents also cross your path. So the Council's procurement regulations and Council's financial regulations were reported here. And also there was a member-led working group to look at the Constitution as well. And that was the results of that work was reported back in February 22. Other reports that are presented to this committee is the annual report on information governance, and also the annual report on health and safety. During the year, there are several risk-related reports that have come to this committee, including the purchase card cash withdrawals, the control failings and lessons learnt, the taxi contractor counter-fraud review, and also various updates in relation to SEND. Moving on finally to external audit, this committee should receive various reports from external audit, and back in December, this committee did receive the report to those charged with governance, the ISA 260 2020-21 reports for both the council and the pension fund, and there they identified that there was no exceptions and there was an unqualified opinion in relation to the value for money aspect. Back in December, one additional item that was brought to the committee's attention was a report by the County Treasurer in relation to the new procurement exercise for the provision of external audit services, which will take effect from March 23. And this committee recommended to full council that they opt into the public sector audit appointments limited process as part of that paper. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any comments in relation to any of that that's been reported today.
Any questions from the committee? Or comments? No. I personally then would like to make a comment. Firstly, to Lisa and all the auditing team, thank you. You've done masses of work over the last year. And to this audit panel, I think that summary says what we do as a panel. Huge amount of work goes through this council, and I really appreciate our internal audit. So thank you. Shall we move on then to 6 and 7 I'm going to take together. That was a verbal report from Ernest Young, but they have now sent apologies. I'm a little bit concerned about this, and so I would like to ask Rob Salmon, as the person who's been audited, are you a little concerned too, or should we not worry too much?
Thank you, Chairman. I think concern is the right word. It's a statement of fact, isn't it? It's a little difficult to be audited if you haven't got auditors available to audit you, and I think that's the nub of the issue that we face. Colleagues from EY have sent apologies this morning. That's due to annual leave clashes, which is a bit unfortunate, because I think an update on their plans for both entities, for the council and the pension fund, is much needed. We need that clarity. I am in regular contact with them, so I can give you an update on where things are at. We're still waiting those plans. This is the 21-22 financial year. It is getting a little bit late in the current year to be receiving those plans, and I think that is long overdue now. The accounts for the previous year, 2020-21, are still outstanding for the council, primarily due to some changes in the regulations that SIPFA are yet to publish, specifically in relation to infrastructure asset accounting. Again, that's a little unfortunate because the rules have changed, and that they've changed late in the day as well, which doesn't help. That said, there are some minor points still outstanding with the current auditors, which should be resolved by now. Excuse me. And again, that comes down to capacity issues within the audit sector as a whole, which I think the audit committee and the chairman quite rightly points out you should be concerned about. The pension fund audit is complete. Technically not signed off yet because, as you know, we include an extract of the pension fund accounts in the county council's accounts to show the overall picture. So disappointing that that whole financial year is yet to be resolved. Looking forward to the current audit, which will be commenced this year, which, as I say, is for the 21-22 accounts. For the pension fund, that's due to start this month, so that's good news. There is a team. As you'd expect, a lot of turnover of staff, so we're seeing new faces, but a team in place in July is in accordance with what I would call a normal year, so that is satisfactory. For the council itself, the audit is due to start in September, which is a lot later than a normal year. Given an end of November legislative sign-off date, there's no way that I consider that will be hit for the 21-22 accounts. As I say, we still need to finish for the whole sector, we need to finish the 2021 accounts in the first instance anyway. So starting the audit with the following wind in September means that things are going to continue to be a little bit late. So there's no doubt in my mind that there are significant resourcing difficulties in the audit sector, which is hampering progress quite significantly. Debbie mentioned PSAA and the award of that contract for the next period. That has been redesigned and refreshed with an aim to focus more on quality, less on price as part of that tendering process. That should help. I understand there's been a good response to that procurement process. Most, if not all, of the big firms have bid for work, so that gives you some hope in terms of capacity. The difficulty is, whilst we've still got accounts open for previous years, it's very difficult to appoint new auditors to start because the old auditors need to finish the work that's outstanding. So it is a difficult position that is now starting to back up a little. So in conclusion, Chair, I would say yes, you're right to be concerned, and may I propose an action that you write to the partner of EY, reminding them of their obligations to present a plan to this committee at its next meeting.
Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's unprofessional of EY to, on the morning of this committee, to say annual leave, because surely they knew somebody was going on holiday some time ago. I just think it's unprofessional. And secondly, I think they should be sending in a brief headline report to us for these meetings, and not just rely on a verbal report. It irritates me that all we get is a verbal report. I absolutely would like to see a headline report. It only takes a page. It's quite quick for them to knock it off and a partner sign it. So I'd like that to go back to Ernst & Young. And thirdly, I think they should be giving us a discount because I would say overall that they're being unprofessional. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Graham. All by the discount, I absolutely agree with you. It's very difficult at the moment to get people into the sector. So I think messing with the money side, I wouldn't be voting for that at the moment. Anne?
I think actually Graham said exactly what I wanted to say, you know, that, and I think we should make a statement that they do come to the next meeting and fully tell us, and with no excuses, no holds barred, they come to the next meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Rob, firstly, before you come back, I absolutely agree we must write as a committee, and can I get approval from everybody else? Yes. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, just one point of clarification. Apologies came in on the 30th of June. I think the point still stands, though. That's way too late in the arrangements for the committee meeting, so that is disappointing. Wholeheartedly endorse that single-page summary. It's unprofessional not to have a plan that's written down as a document, which is what we want to consider. So I'll certainly pass that back. And as regard fees, I think the chairman's quite right. There is a resourcing issue with the level of fees, and the quality and quantity of auditors you get as a consequence. I think its price has been pushed down far too far with the previous round. We have taken it upon ourselves to try and resolve that locally, which is why it's disappointed that it hasn't come off. But actually, I can assure the committee that when it comes to matters of error or failure on behalf of the auditors, those are fees that I don't pay for. I can assure you that I put a robust challenge into those.
Everyone content? Yeah, brilliant. So we'll move on to much more professional. Code of Corporate Governance 22 update from Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is the annual review of the Code of Corporate Governance against SIPFA and Solice's Delivering Good Governance framework. So on page 15 of your pack, this provides a bit more background information in relation to the framework. So the framework was first published in 2016, and there are 7 core principles which a council, local authority would want to display as part of delivering governance. These are itemised in the list A to G in paragraph 1 and relate to things like integrity, openness, various interventions, stakeholder engagement and transparency. So the Corporate Governance Working Group, which meets regularly throughout the year, reviews our Code of Corporate Governance against those principles, and the details of that review is attached as Appendix 1 to this report, which I'll go through with you shortly. Appendix 1 also sets out where it's considered that there are further actions to undertake during the year ahead. Appendix 2 refers to the single sheet framework, which is quite a nice representation of the council's governance structure in place, and it sets it out quite neatly there. So if I can ask you to turn to page 19 of your pack, which is Appendix 1. This really sets out in a bit more detail, a bit more background around the Sit for Solace framework, and again how it fits into the annual governance statement. And this guidance is really intended to assist authorities in reviewing their own local corporate governance arrangements during the year. Appendix 1 also refers to the monitoring and review process. So as I've mentioned, the Corporate Governance Working Group go through the Code of Corporate Governance, and during the year we'll update it. And again, this review comes to the Audit and Standards Committee annually. On pages 23 to pages 42 of your pack, this is the main work that's undertaken as part of the review, and it sets out within the table the core principle running across the top, and then on the left hand side it sets out the various sub-principles. The middle column is then the council's current arrangements in terms of how it evidences those sub-principles and the principle in place, and the right hand side, that column there sets out any further action that's going to be undertaken during the year. So what you will see within Appendix 1 is that there have been 13 new actions to undertake during the year. They are spread across all of the 7 principles. And just to give you a quick flavour of what they relate to, there's continued training on Members' Code of Conduct, there's the development of a volunteer management framework, greater visibility of the Corporate Risk Register, also the ongoing review of HR policies. In addition, there's going to be a refresh of the modern day slavery and human trafficking statement, as well as an update on the business case for data analytics. Those sorts of things, as you can imagine, they all help to ensure that we deliver good governance across the council. Each of those actions have a responsible officer assigned and also an implementation date as we head through the year. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions in relation to any of the detail contained in Appendix 1. And again, as referred to, Appendix 2 is the single sheet governance framework, which quite nice and neatly sets out the governance structure for the council.
Any questions, members? Again, Deb, I just have the one, which is on page 42 on the computer, or Appendix 1, page 20. Right at the top, it says that Audit Standards by SIPFA, and it was awarded the highest level of compliance, but that was in 2018, if you go back to the page. This is lovely news, but 2018, when are we due the next one? Is it every 5 years?
Yes, Chair. So every 5 years, we have to renew our sort of procurement of that. But that's one of my tasks actually over the next month, is to go through that procurement exercise. The actual assessment won't be carried out until Q4, the results of which will be reported back to this committee after that assessment's taken place.
Thank you. All good news. No more questions. I think we can move on. Internal Audit Report Outturns 2021. Again, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. So this is perhaps the biggest report that I present to this committee annually, and this sets out the work of the Internal Audit Service that was carried out last year. So again, on page 45 sets out a bit of background to this report. So as part of our public sector internal audit standards, internal audit is required to deliver an annual audit opinion and report, and this is this report. Our standards set out what that report needs to cover, which is the overall audit opinion for the control environment for the council, a summary of the work that underpins that opinion, and also a statement on conformance with the public sector internal audit standards and also the local government application note. You'll be well aware that during the year and as part of our progress update on the delivery of the plan, there are various additional pieces of work that get added into our programme, as well as some cancellations. However, overall, and I'll come on to this a little bit later on, we have delivered 93% of the plan for the year, which exceeds our KPI of 90%. And again, it's not uncommon, and you'll see later, for some reports to be at draft report stage. And that is because we do like to fit in with services where we can. We don't sort of impose ourselves and make life difficult for auditees. So during the course of the year, we do fit in with them, and therefore some reports are at draft report stage. However, we are actively seeking those reports to be finalised, and as we speak, there's been some further finalisation of some of the reports that were reported in here as well. So just to give you a bit of context to the work that we performed during the year, at paragraph 6 towards the bottom of page 46, you will see a bit of metrics around the number of controls that we evaluate and a comparison based upon last year. So for 21-22, we've evaluated over 1,000 controls, 1,206 to be precise, and of those we've categorised those as adequate, partial or weak controls. And overall, you'll see that there is a general improvement across the board there, as denoted by the green sort of markers. But clearly, those controls that they obviously inform the content of the audit reports and also the audit opinions. So our audit work, we categorise and give an opinion of either a substantial assurance, adequate assurance or limited assurance. And again, we have a methodology for one, giving risk ratings to recommendations and how that then feeds into the overall audit opinion for that area. For the rest of this report, I'm going to split it into 5 categories really. And the 5 categories are the high-risk auditable areas, the key financial systems, other system reviews, compliance reviews, and also special investigations, because they're the sort of main chunks of the work that we do throughout the year. So for the 21-22 audit plan outcomes then, looking at the high-risk auditable areas that were reviewed during the year, well, as you can imagine, we focused on the digital strategy transformation and various ICT projects, because obviously ICT, cybersecurity are sort of key issues that we would want to pick up on, as well as our sort of new SharePoint system and EDRMS system as well. And there's a new pensions IT system that came into play towards the back end of 21-22. Also, during the year, we've continued to respond and support the council in their COVID recovery work, and also there's been some new areas that made the sort of top risk reviews in 21-22 relating to quality, diversity, inclusion, and you've received that report during the year, as well as a report on decision-making processes as well. So in paragraph 10, you will see, and actually over the page, on page 49, you will see that table which lists all of those high-risk auditable areas that were carried out during the year. And what you will see there is that there are no limited, so all those high-risk reviews have been given a positive assurance rating, which is pleasing to note. Also, for those reports that have been given an adequate assurance opinion, there is only one high-level recommendation that's being made in relation to brokerage and around the policies and procedures for brokering care. And so again, there aren't too many high-level recommendations being made in relation to the high-risk reviews. Just to note, because all of the high-risk reviews have been given an adequate or substantial assurance, we thought that wouldn't bring those to your to the actual committee today, and we would actually put those as a suite of work that we will distribute to members of this committee after this meeting today for you to consider. And if there's any questions, then please obviously get back to me. Can I just, oh, I haven't finished, I'll just...
Debbie, could you just, perhaps I just don't quite understand it, but on the table in page 10, you've got business continuity management, organisation resilience, the supply chain, and you've put position statement, whereas where you've got draft report with management on others, the other two, you've put substantial assurance. So what does a position statement mean?
Yep, Chair, happy just to very quickly clarify that. So from time to time, it was a bit like the equality, diversity, inclusion piece of work, where that is currently under a service's own internal review, and it's too new really to form an opinion. We will do a piece of work which supports that service, so it would be unfair to award an opinion to it. So we give a position statement to say what's going on, what development work are they doing. So that's when it's a position statement. But there are recommendations attached to that piece of work. It's just that we don't form an opinion because it's too new an area. Okay. Okay. Moving on to page 50 and 51 of your pack, this sets out our audit work in relation to the main financial systems. And again, this is a very, I suppose, positive state of play in terms of there are no limited assurance opinions. There are a number of substantial assurance opinions that have been awarded. One area worthy of note is the sales to cash piece of work.
So previously, that has been awarded a limited assurance review. However, this year, there has been some improvement, and that's been reported in the audit report. So we've highlighted that there are new arrangements in place. There has been improved arrangements for management reporting, as well as some additional capacity within that team. So although debts do appear to still be increasing, the service has done an awful lot to improve that situation, hence why that opinion has been upgraded to an adequate assurance opinion for 21-22. Also, it's pleasing to note that there are no high-level recommendations being made in relation to the financial system. So overall, that is a good thumbs up for the financial management of the council. The next category of work is in relation to other systems audits. And again, we only report by exception here, so where there is a limited assurance opinion. So under the banner of other assurance audits, there are 4 limited assurance reports. 3 of those have been finalised, and there is one limited assurance that's at draft relating to looked after children, joint funding and complex needs placements. Again, once that report has been finalised, that will come to this committee for deliberation. In terms of the high-level recommendations being reported in those reports, they are detailed on page 52 and 53. And again, you've already received the climate change report, and also the agency staffing contracts report came last time to this committee. The Infrastructure Plus Asset Data Management report, unfortunately, due to the auditee's availability, they were unable to attend, so therefore we have deferred that report, and that will come to you at the next Audit and Standards Committee as well. And that's already in the auditee's diary. Where there is either an adequate assurance or, again, a position statement being made, we've detailed in paragraph 18 those reports where there is a high-level recommendation being made, and they're detailed in the table on page 53 and 54 of your pack. In addition to all of our work, where it's appropriate and where a system may use personal data, we also complete a data protection and GDPR checklist. So that was carried out for 11 system audit reviews during the year. There were some areas for improvement, and they've been detailed in paragraph 20 on page 54 of your pack. Moving on to the compliance review category of work now. So the table in paragraph 21 sets out all of our compliance reviews that are undertaken. So there was 38 compliance reviews undertaken during the year. And again, it's been previously reported to this committee that there has been some concern over the number of limited assurance reviews that have happened within schools. So there's been 14 limited assurance opinion reports issued during 21-22. Again, in relation to that, there's a number of reasons why this may have happened. One of them is Dave Fletcher, who's sitting just down the bottom there. He revised our fraud risk assessment for schools, so and our selection of schools was a bit more targeted, which has meant that not all the bigger schools were reviewed this year. And again, when you have smaller schools, sometimes their systems and processes may not be as robust. But again, we want to know that so we can help schools improve their processes. So there are 14 limiteds. I mean, compared to last year and the year before that, there were only 3 limited assurances, so it is a significant increase. As part of our compliance reviews, we not only look at the financial administrative arrangements in place, but we also include within our programme of work a review of the school's payroll. And the various weaknesses are detailed on pages 56, 57 and all the way through onto page 59 of your pack. So there's a whole host of areas of non-compliance under the banner of governance, income, procurement, expenditure and payroll. In terms of other compliance reviews, we also look at residential homes. The auditors go out to see what's going on there, and also complex needs units. And again, some areas for improvement have been noted following that work, and that's detailed in paragraph 26 of the report. In terms of the special investigations and fraud and corruption work, well, Dave Fletcher within the confidential agenda will talk to you a little bit more about the work that we've done during the year in relation to that. Dave does an awful lot of work in relation to data matching, continuous controls monitoring, and obviously the main bread and butter is to investigate any fraud referrals that are passed our way. So he'll go into a bit more detail in relation to all of that work.
Anne, sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I want to go back to page 53 actually, and the weakness in bus service contracts. Can you embellish a bit more about that, please, and what's been done? The letting of local bus service operator contracts.
I'd have to just familiarise myself on the detail within that report, but it will be around the tendering of those services, but I don't know the detail just offhand, but I can get back to you on that if that's okay after this meeting. Is that all right?
Yes, I'd be very interested to find out. Thank you.
The table at the top refers to the total financial losses, either fraud or error, found during the year, and that's split across three main headings. The special investigations, there was £32,000 worth of losses. The National Fraud Initiative, which is a proactive exercise, there was £20,000 worth of losses. And then based upon our CCM work and other data matching that we proactively undertake ourselves, there was a value of £139,000 worth of losses. So the total financial losses, not all of that is fraud by the way, is 191,748. The number of fraud referrals that we've received during the year has slightly reduced from 34 last year to 28, and 21 of those relate to council business. The other 7 relate to other councils across the country. To put those fraud losses into some comparison, you can see on the table on page 61 of your pack, paragraph 31, where that stands in relation to previous financial losses. So, and that spans the last 10 years. So it is high. However, just to remind you that, you know, we are proactively using our data now to try and highlight where there are issues. And Dave can talk a little bit more about this, the latest data matching exercise relating to residential homes and deceased persons, which has created a huge proportion of that loss. So in terms of the scoring for this category, we base this scoring based upon 2 elements. The first one being any financial losses, and then secondly, the evaluation of control. So we have scored that 70%, and I'll explain how that feeds into the process in a minute. So that's sort of a very quick canter through our main outcomes for 21-22. So what that means then for the actual audit opinion, well, we sort of use an assessment of, we look at the number of audits within each category that have scored adequate or higher, and if the number of those audits are 90% or higher, we will give that a pass within that category. So if you look at table 35 on page 63 of your pack, you will see that 3 of those categories have passed and 2 have failed. The 2 failed categories are the compliance reviews because of the 14 limiteds that we've had during the year, and the special investigations category, which is the 70% I've just quoted, also falls below the 90% pass mark. So 3 out of those 5 categories have passed, which means that we are for the year giving an adequate assurance opinion over the control environment for 21-22. Moving on now to the performance measures. The Internal Audit Service has two key performance measures. The first one being the delivery against the audit plan. And as mentioned very early on, that was 93% of the plan delivered during the year. There was 100% delivered for the compliance plan. We also look at our quality customer satisfaction surveys, and again, all of our work scored above the equivalent of a good score, which is 100% of all of our work that got a good rating from our auditees. Finally, as part of this report, we are obliged to report upon compliance with our public sector internal audit standards and the local government application note. So during the year, we undertake our own sort of self-assessment, and I undertake my own internal assessment of the work that's being conducted. And at the end of the year, I do an annual self-assessment against a number of standards. And what I'm reporting here is that we are 94% compliant with the standards, which is high. There are some standards where we are partially compliant with, and some standards that we aren't going to comply with. The four areas where the standards aren't in place, they're detailed in paragraph 48 on page 67. And that relates to things like the standard says that this committee will approve my pay, for example, where in local government that just doesn't happen because these standards do cover both private and public internal audit services. We do have an action plan though, which is attached as Appendix 3 to this report, and that highlights those areas where we feel that we could do more in relation to those three areas that are partially compliant. And that relates to areas relating to risk management, assurance mapping, and also to continue to develop our data analytics as we go through the year. However, what I can say is that based upon our compliance with the public internal audit standards and the work performed, there are no impairments or restrictions to the work carried out during the year that would stop us from forming our annual audit opinion for the year. So, Chair, I know that's quite a lot of information to take in. I'm happy to take any other questions, and I'll get back to Councillor Edgeler on that issue.
Before we take questions, are we bringing David in, or is that in the second section? Okay, thank you. Graham.
I'd just like to say, Debbie, that it was a brilliant report. Thank you very much. Really good. And I'm absolutely delighted to see that the trend is upwards.
No other questions? Yeah, I'd like to echo. Oh, Phil, sorry.
Sorry, I'm sort of slightly off-piece down here, aren't I? It's just regarding to the fraud, or the I think it was £93,000 which has been lost, and I get that, you know, amongst the huge amount of finances we are, that's always going to happen, and there's a couple of concerns. Firstly, it's certainly on the increase. So the simple question is, do you think our reporting is better? Do you think we're actually reporting it better, and that would be part of that increase? I know you said that. I just want clarity on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as well, it's about how we are using the council's data to highlight potential exceptions. So the majority of these losses is based upon the proactive work. So we're actively going out looking for where there's maybe an exception.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think you're right. In overall terms, the numbers going up. I think that is in the main due to that improved reporting, the better targeting, the better use of data. It is an old adage in management speak, isn't it, that you can't manage what you can't measure. So actually, I'm quite comfortable that this is now being uncovered far more, because that means that therefore we can learn from it. The other bit to mention, because a couple of £100,000 for an authority of this size won't bring us to our knees, but actually for me it's it's the staff impact, it's the human impact of these sorts of frauds, which is probably more damaging than the finances. Individual members of staff who are targeted by fraudsters feel absolutely dreadful. Doesn't matter how much the amount is. The fact that they've been caught, they've been done over, if you like, and public money has been put at risk, if not lost, makes them feel dreadful. So the other element of this then is, so the follow-up is what? And in a few instances, we have been able to either trace down and stop things from happening again, or in some instances actually recover the money through various systems. And again, the staff and the emotional response to getting the money back has just been absolutely wonderful to witness, to be honest. Thank you.
And that's, Rob, that's great to hear, because you do forget that. You do forget that money's vital, but people are pretty important too. But the one, do you think because of our better reporting then that it's showing up that a greater amount of fraudulence within the system, but could it also be the opposite, that actually we're probably catching more without knowing that because of the higher level reporting, so one maybe balances the other, you know, because I guess it's pretty difficult to know how much you've stopped. You know, that's a pretty difficult number to measure, isn't it? I'm not even sure we try to measure it, but I hope I framed that question right, Chair.
You have, Phil, but I'm going to get David to answer that one.
To give some context, out the number Debbie gave you there is £190,000. 124,000 was from us matching internal records of deceased people to people we're paying for their residential care homes. Now, the NFI used to cover that every other year. We found more this year, but it might be because we've got the data and matched it quickly. The NFI, there's quite a lag, so when you look at it, most of them are resolved already. That money will come back through a contractual arrangement. I wouldn't consider it fraud. We have looked into this a couple of years ago as whether we should investigate these as a fraud or oversight. I think we took the view we should consider it oversight, and a letter was sent out to care homes. We'll repeat that again, but I wouldn't consider that fraud as much as error. The CCM, again off the top of my head, about £12,000 I think we found in the CCM. Again off the top of my head, I think nearly all of that we'd put down to error that we're picking up. And because we've got a nice expenses system, I can play with the numbers there, look for anomalies. We're finding a lot of potential small oversights which we maybe wouldn't have found before. So I think take those numbers out. Yes, we've got some fraud, but also we are finding error.
Thank you. Anne.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to ask the question, actually. I know what charges these residential homes, and I'm talking about looked after children and children that are placed in these residential homes, and the money that this county council is charged. How can we be assured that we're getting value for money, actually? Because some of these charges are absolutely can't even say the word, astronomical.
Well, we have included looked after children and placements as part of the 21-22 audit plan, and that is one of those draft reports that's limited assurance. I think there are 3 high-level recommendations that are currently being discussed with the auditee. So when that report comes to you, hopefully at the September meeting, as it's limited, it may not give you all the answers that you want and the assurance, but you'll be able to talk to the officers involved to get that assurance.
It's just that, thank you, Chairman, it's just that the private companies, you know, and I'm just worried that we are getting what we're paying for and the children are being looked after and giving them the help that they can, that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I think Robert might be able to answer a little more.
Yeah, I think the value for money challenge is a good one. And in typical accountants' fashion, the answer is it depends. It does depend on the state of the market. Sometimes there is no provision to put some of these children in, or very, very limited. So we are unfortunately at the mercy of the marketplace. So I think capacity across the whole sector is, we're talked about it earlier in terms of audit. It's the same in children's services. You are really restricted on where you can go to. Unfortunately, what that tends to do is push price up. But as Debbie has said, the staff in that service area are then charged with ensuring that we are getting the best return for the money, notwithstanding that price dictates where the market's at the moment. They are looking at alternative options, for example, in-house provision, but that takes time to establish. And again, there's a further capacity issue, which is getting hold of, employing social workers to run the establishments. So it is a very, very complicated and very difficult situation at the moment, unfortunately.
Thank you, Anne. Bernard.
Debbie, I mean, looking at fraud anyway, it's like looking at an iceberg. But what I did see in the report was the fact that people who have died, people are still claiming money for them. Is that what I'm seeing? Because surely something could be done about that. Because surely some reporting has to be made when people have died. And surely it is to the county council.
Bernard, I think it is, but David can answer better.
Yeah, it's an exercise we'll repeat in the future. My understanding is people have died, the care homes are not informing us promptly, whether that's malicious or oversight, who's to say. These do tend to come out in the wash eventually when a social worker goes to visit them, but that could be, a once a year exercise.
I mean, is this over a period of time or just for like a couple of weeks or?
That £120,000 was a 6-month set of deceased person data.
You can, Phil, yes.
I dealt with my mother-in-laws, and often these things are often you understand them when you've done them. So I dealt with my mother-in-law's concerns, and one of the things we did was a tell everybody. So you sign a form, and everybody's told that she died. And then I had bills from DWP and also what she'd been overpaid. It was no issue. She sent the money back. So could the county council not be part of that? Tell everybody. Is that too simple a question?
I believe they are in the Tell Me Once service. So it is,
tell me once, that's what he called. Not tell everybody,
Yeah.
Tell me once, yeah.
Yeah, so Staffordshire does have that system in place
So,
here.
so if we know they've died then, and we've been told they've died, is there not a system that that we're not paying for months for somebody that's died?
I think that's something that Dave can look into in terms of the Tell Me Once service and how that interacts with the ACFS team to have a look on Care Director in terms of the bills that we're paying for residential homes. So I think that that's an improvement there that we can make.
Okay, because it doesn't work instantly, I guess that, because I know I had some bills afterwards which I just repaid, because, thank you, Chair, and thank you for...
Thanks, Phil. I, like Graham and Phil, looked at the fraud as a bonus, not as this is awful, fraud's going up. Because if you don't investigate, you don't find it. So I see that our investigations are working here, and I'm very pleased with that. I have just one ask, Debbie, that the sales to cash, even though that's adequate, that we do carry on monitoring on a regular basis, because that is the simplest. But I'm so pleased to see all those different things in place now. And absolutely thank you for this report. It's huge and very positive. Oh, Rob.
If you permit me a slight indulgence, Chair, if I could place on records my thanks to Debbie and the team. I think this is a super job well done. And picking up on the value for money theme, at just under £1 million for all of that work, I'd like to think that represents value for money for the council as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we all agree with that statement, don't we? Yep, brilliant. Well, Deborah, we are going to move on, and thank you once again. Number 10, Code of Conduct for Members, Annual Report, and that's coming from Julie. Or is it John? Okay, sorry, John.
Yes, it's just the regular annual report to let you know how many complaints we've had about members, as obviously you have that responsibility for overseeing the member complaints, the member standards process. As you'll see from the report, there's a table there that shows we've had 11 complaints during the year in question in respect of 7 members. Obviously, sort of some of the issues have generated multiple complaints about specific members, so that's why it's that the number of members is less than the number of complaints. All tend to be fairly sort of member-specific issues about the member and how they relate to their constituents. Don't seem to be any particular themes as we've had in the past, so social media was at one time a bit of a theme around members' posts on social media. That doesn't seem to be quite such an issue at the moment. And just as the report says, we do now have a social media officer working the comms section, so I think they'll be obviously providing some support and advice to members, offering some training about social media, which will hopefully kind of help members to get better at avoiding some of the pitfalls of social media. Obviously, I do have the details of the individual members and the details of the complaint, but we are in public and it wouldn't be appropriate, I don't think, for us to discuss the specific details there. My overall perspective is that we continue to have very good standards as an authority. Members treat each other properly, they deal properly with the members of the public, and yes, there are still a standard, a trickle of complaints about standards come in every year, but it is a trickle, and as I say, it does seem to be about specific issues that specific constituents have taken umbrage with.
Thank you, John. Graham?
We are politicians, and I'd be utterly surprised if there weren't complaints, whether they're founded or not. So I expect complaints.
Any other questions? Phil?
I think this report's surprisingly good. It's, try not to be flippant, but it is. So it doesn't altogether surprise me. After sitting on this council, I'm in my 6th year now, and I see a pretty good level of professionalism generally across this council, across members, and that's what I witness on a daily basis. So just one question, really, John, and that is. There are themes obviously come up during years, so I can't remember anything in the last few months that has been quite massive, but there are things come up, and of course one of the things, if a councillor particularly is not necessarily agreeing with a group or a protest group, and then the obvious thing to do is to continue to complain about that member or a number of members. This would appear that that's not the case. Does that happen where we get an high number of complaints because we have a theme?
Yes. I wouldn't say we get a high number of complaints even when we do have a theme. I do recall when there was issues around Cannock Chase a year or so ago, that did generate some complaints. I think in the complaints that are listed here, there was one related to Burton Library, for example, but it was just the one complaint rather than there being a big proliferation. So sometimes those issues can cause complaints. Highways can lead to complaints. I think often through the frustration of the process sometimes that people go through. But ultimately they're sort of founded on people being unhappy with the service or the way that the council is operating or with policy rather than the behaviour of the individual members concerned.
That's great. That sort of cheers me up as somebody who was very much at the centre of the Cannock Chase issues. The one thing we learned online was they would list all of the things that they could complain to a member about. So it used to be the known principles, and they'd list all those. So, if your local member or councillor doesn't comply with these, well, in you go. And generally, we do comply. We do. We may not. I often say to residents, I'll get you an answer. Sadly, it may not be the answer you want, and I start off with that every time. And that seems to play well for me. I'm not going to make this parochial, but this seems a good report, and I think when we have the Burton Library and we had the Chase, they were two pretty hefty things, and to see so few complaints, which tells you that the members behaved professionally during those somewhat challenging times. Right. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Bernard.
Can I just say, Chair, I'm finding on my own patch a hell of a lot more work is coming my way over the last 2 years. And I think a lot of this is because people are working, well, supposed to be working from home. So I think consequently what they're doing is that they're finding much more time to get on these little units and send us more work to do. So if you find that we're going to get more complaints, maybe that's the reason why.
Thank you, Bernard. And yes, I'm finding the workload harder, but I don't think that's bringing in complaints, so let's not worry about that. That was a good report, John. Thank you very much for that. So on to proposed changes to the Constitution, procurement regulations, and back to you again, John.
Thank you, Chairman. So what this is about is we have procurement rules in the organisation which everyone follows, but there are some sort of exemptions giving in those rules for specific type of arrangements, just to make it a little easier to be able to bring in a contractual support when needed. And there's a list there in the report of those current exemptions. The suggestion is that we would like to have an additional exemption relating to where we need some extra HR support for specific circumstances, such as certain types of investigations. So the kind of situation I have in mind is that if, for example, we need someone to investigate in the organisation, we would normally use another member of management in the organisation. We do have a process in place to give people the skills and resources needed to carry out investigations, even some quite complicated investigations. But occasionally that is considered to be inappropriate. So, for example, if we had an investigation that we need to carry out against the director of the organisation, it'd be very difficult for that to be carried out by someone internally. I think that kind of the power dynamics at play there make that difficult. It'd be difficult to have another member of the senior leadership team do the investigation, because they're talking about an investigation of someone who's a close colleague. It'd be difficult to have someone from elsewhere in the organisation carry that out because of the seniority of the individual involved. And what we'd normally do in that kind of situation is bring someone in from outside. Where we'd normally go to is the Local Government Association have a panel of expert investigators who operate on, I think, a bit of a cab rank type principle. You go to the LGA and say, have you got someone who could help us with this investigation? And they have an experienced list of external investigators that we could use. Another example where we might need to bring in some specialist HR support is if, for example, there was a grievance about a senior member of the HR team. So in that circumstance, say I was the person who was dealing with the matter, I'm the deciding manager, I would want some HR advice given to me to help me with that matter. Normally I'd get that HR advice, it'd be an officer from the HR department that would give me that support. But in those circumstances where it is against someone very senior within the HR team, again, it becomes very difficult for that member of the HR team to be able to give that advice because of their sort of relationship with whoever the person under investigation is. So in those kind of circumstances, again, we will go out and source someone external to provide us with that HR support. This, I think, is meant to make that straightforward for us to go out and get someone when we need someone. We're not going out and tendering. We're going out and getting people that we know can do the job. So we know that people on the LGA list of investigators can do the job. We know who has the experience to be able to come in from outside and give us that external HR advice. Just tendering it and finding whoever sort of comes out on top. For the starters, it takes time when these are matters that often need to be dealt quickly to be able to get to grips with them. And as well as that time thing, it means you get someone who you don't know whether they can do the job or not, because until you know they've got that experience, it's hard to make that that call. So that's why I think this would help the Assistant Director for People in those kind of specific situations to be able to draw that resource in when it's needed, but only when it's needed. As I was had a conversation with Councillor Hutton earlier about we need to train people in the up in the organisation. Absolutely, that's what we do for most of our matters. We have that trained support internally, whether it's HR advisors or whether it's expert officer investigators. But in certain limited circumstances, we're asking for this exemption to be put in the Constitution to make it possible to get that external advice in quickly.
Thank you, John. So John's here today to get our approval. Do we give him approval or do we have reasons not? Graham?
I'd just say that John's explanation is considerably greater than was listed in front of me. I was going off what was in front of me. So I'd already indicated that we should be pressing for a lot more training of senior officers to do this. But as we are now talking about investigation of senior HR staff and potentially directors and assistant directors, I now withdraw any objection I had. As you know, I'm very keen that procurement is done in the most professional and effective way. And I have, as a government procurement person in the past, used exactly the same thing as is being proposed, where we've gone very quickly to an external person that is known to have the skill sets to do this. And so I withdraw my objection and would support it. Thank you.
And did you want to say something?
I just want to agree with what John's saying, actually. You know, it would be very difficult if we were discussing councillors, you know, and trying to talk about our colleagues and everything. So I totally agree with John, you know, that we do move forward on that. Thank you, and I support it.
Thank you, Anne. So as a whole, are we giving approval? Thank you, members. Apologies, John.
Can I just come back to say, you know, apologies for not giving more detail in the report. I accept that one. But just sort of that reassurance as well around doing things internally. That is how managers want to deal with things. It is the sort of quickest and best way, having sort of skilled and trained managers to be able to do those investigations. We absolutely support that approach. It is just those very few exceptions.
Thank you, John. Thank you to any public that have been listening today, but I have to now exclude you. Oh no, I don't exclude you. I've missed out number 12. I do apologise. Forward plan for audit and standards. Back to you, Debbie. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick item. So this is just one of the regular items that comes to this committee. So this is the forward plan for 22-23, which lists all the various items that are going to be presented for the year ahead. And this allows members to consider what is on the agenda to see that there's nothing that's missed or any gaps. So, Chair, just happy to take any queries or comments in relation to any of those future agenda items.
Are we all okay with those? Absolutely. No, that's fine, Deb. Thank you very much. Right, now I will move swiftly on to that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended of the Local Government Act 1972, as indicated below. Are we